Chapter 7. The morning after the events just recorded, as Mr. Montegu, the brother of Sir Ambrose, was sitting at the breakfast-side table with his wife and daughter, they were startled by the unexpected arrival of a letter from Sir Ambrose. "Bless me!" cried Mr. Montegu, moved for once to forget his usual habits of indifference. "I do believe this is a letter from my brother." "Your brother?" screamed Miss Montegu, starting up to examine it, in agitation overturning a patient steam of a coffee machine, by which the coffee was roasted, ground, made, and poured out with an ad libitum of boiling milk and sugar, all in the short space of 5 minutes. "Oh," she continued, "I'm scalded to death." "I hope not, my dear," said Mr. Montegu, calmly taking up his letter, and carefully examining it on all sides without opening it. "Yes," continued he, "it is indeed from my brother, and I hope it contains no ill news, for I do not perceive any signs of mourning about it." And so saying, he very tranquilly laid the letter again on the table, and commenced sipping his coffee. "Papa, hadn't you better open your letter and read it?" asked Clara, who was busily employed in assisting her mother. "Ah," resumed Mr. Montegu, "true, what? Never thought of that. I think I had." Then again taking the letter in his hand, he broke the seal and gave it to Clara to read. "And do you think my daughters will leave me when I am in this miserable condition, Mr. Montegu, to read letters from your brother, Mr. Montegu, a man who has always treated me with such disrespect, Mr. Montegu, and I am half scalded to death?" "I'm sure I'm very sorry, my dear," began Mr. Montegu. "Oh, spare your sorrow," exclaimed his wife, "for I'm sure you don't care a single straw about me. You're a cruel man." "Hadn't I better read the letter?" asked Clara, trembling at the thought of the domestic sparring she was about to ensue. "Yes, yes, read, my daughter," said the father, glad of any pretext to avert the coming storm, for though the seldom disturbed himself about anything, he provided his study was not swept oftener than once a month, and he was not obliged to submit to the unsupportable figure of arranging his ideas in a form tense, necessary for conversation. He had yet the most inconceivable horror of his wife's fluency of tongue, thus affording a striking proof of the ingratitude of mortals, who often ungraciously find fault in everything of which they have the most occasion to be thankful, as it must be allowed that nothing could really be more convenient for a man of a taciturn disposition than to have a wife who could manage to talk at once to him and herself too. Notwithstanding the encouragement of her father, Clara, however, still paused, looking with a timid eye towards her mother for that lady's permission to begin. Curiosity struggled powerfully with anger in the breast of Mrs. Montegu for some minutes, but at last the former prevailed, and with a nod she permitted Clara to read. She immediately began as follows. "My dear brother," observed Miss Montegu, "so his last letter began, 'Sir.' Here he's wonderfully civil, I think." "Pshaw!" exclaimed her husband. Clara continued. "I am happy to inform you that my dear Edmund has gained a glorious victory." "And what is that to us, I should like to know?" said Mrs. Montegu. "For my part, I have too much pride in myself about other people, who don't afford themselves without me." Clara went on. "We are all coming up to London to be present at the grand triumph the Queen is going to give him, and thinking it a pity there should be a misunderstanding." "Oh, what's that, child?" exclaimed Mr. Montegu, laying down a problem which she had been studying ever since she began. "Read that again, Clara." "And thinking it a pity there should be a misunderstanding any longer between myself and you, with both being fast approaching to the grave, I intend, with your and Mrs. Montague's permission—" Mrs. Montague's permission!" cried the delighted Miss Montague. "Are you quite sure he says that, Clara?" And she pressed over her daughter's shoulder to ascertain the joyful fact. "Well, well, I do declare he really does say so. Look, my dear, there it is. Miss Montague's permission. He never called me Mrs. Montague before. God bless him, a nice old gentleman. I'm sure all shall be very glad to see him with a brave son. Only think, my dear, what an honor it is to have one's hero as a family. Read on, Clara. I don't feel quite interested to find out any particulars of my nephew's victory. You know he is my nephew, Mr. Montague, as well as yours, as I am your wife, and he is your own brother's son. So read on, Clara, and let us know all about him." Clara obeyed the moment her mother gave her an opportunity. "I intend, with your and Mrs. Montague's permission, to take the opportunity of visiting you. I remain with kind remembrances to Mrs. Montague and my niece, to whom I long to be introduced, your affectionate brother, Ambrose Montegu." "Very well," said Mr. Montague. "I shall be glad to see him. I always loved my brother, and I was quite sorry when we were not friends." "Here's a postscript," resumed Clara as she read. "I quite forgot to inform you that the Queen has conferred a title upon my son, and I shall have to present him to you as Lord Edmund." "I am very glad to hear it," exclaimed the gratified uncle. "And so am I," reiterated his wife. "My nephew, Lord Edmund Montagu. I wonder when they will be here. I must set about making preparations for them immediately. Strike the kitchen automation, Clara, and summon all the domestics' assistants together, that I may give my orders. Dear me, what a bustle am I in!" In one corner of the room stood a kind of organ. By playing certain notes upon it, which imitation was given to the lower regions of was wanted in the parlor, the organ having long tubes communicating with the kitchen through which the sound was conveyed. Clara accordingly sat down, and by striking a few chords, soon assembled all the domestics of the family. "I expect company," said Mrs. Montague, with an air of excessive consequence. "My brother-in-law, Sir Ambrose Montegu, and my nephew, Lord Edmund Montagu, are coming to stay with us during a triumph with which the most gracious Majesty the Queen intends to honor Lord Edmund, my nephew. When he was my brother-in-law, Sir Ambrose, and he did say, my nephew, Lord Edmund, and then coming, Mr. Montague. Clara, look at Mr. Ambrose's letter again. I intend, says he, addressing Mr. Montague, with your and Mrs. Montague's permission to be with you on such a day, but I forget what day he mentions. He does not say which day, replied Clara, consulting the letter. Well, at any rate, it will be very soon, resumed Miss Montague, and we must prepare accordingly. You know the connections of my brother-in-law, Sir Ambrose, are very high, and I do not doubt in his intimate friend, the Duke of Cornwall, will call to see him. Nay, perhaps he may dine at my table with 2 princesses, his daughter and niece. Indeed, there's no knowing, but perhaps even her most gracious Majesty the Queen may condescend at our humble doors. Do you hear, all of you? You must be all attentive. You, Angelina, as cook, you will have the most upon your hands. Remember, nothing can be too plain for great people. Fricassees and ragouts are only devoured by the canaille. I am instructed of that, madam, replied Angela, a great, fat, bonny-looking cook. But I flatter myself to know how to conduct dishes. That is the very thing I want you to avoid, interrupted her mistress. It is the fashion now for great people to only have one dish, and that is plainly cooked as possible. I have been told by a friend of mine who got the peep at the great dinner the Queen gave the other day to her foreign ambassadors, that there is nothing in the world upon the table but that of a huge round of boiled beef and a great dish of smoking potatoes with their jackets on. Well, ma'am, replied Angelina, I will rally both my physical and mental energies to afford you with all the satisfaction in my power, notwithstanding which I am free to confess that, in my opinion, the gastronomic science is now cruelly neglected, and that you do not have the digestive powers of the stomach can be properly excited from the dormant states in which unstimulating food, as you mentioned. Besides, the muscular force of the stomach must be trained to compose such solid viands, and I should think the diaphragm seriously injured. You, Alfonso, continued Mrs. Montague, addressing the footman, and cruelly interrupting the learned tone of the Duke. I must have a new suit of livery. In the meantime, arrange properly the best drawing room and clean the pictures. There's a fine large painting of one of the old English artists over the door, the colours of which are quite faded. I'm afraid you have used something improper to clean them. Indeed, madam, replied Alfonso. I think the fault is in the picture itself. It did not dry well originally. I don't think the oil that was used in the composition of carbon and hydrogen mingled in the proper proportions. You know, madam, that oil in general has an amazingly affinity for oxygen and absorbs it rapidly. Now, though the oil of this picture has been exposed for years to the action of the common atmospheric air, it has never thickened properly to a concrete state. Eustace, you, as butler, must not take care to bring any variety of wines to the table. Nothing is drunk now but port and sherry, and even they are going out of fashion. Have plenty of strong ale, however, and porter, for now they are not reckoned for the most eloquent liquors for the ladies. I shall do my utmost endeavour to obey your injunctions, madam, said Eustace, bowing respectfully. But I cannot imagine that any species of corn, even if it has undergone vinous fermentation, can replace a liquid so agreeable to the palate, as well as conductive to the sanity of the body, as the juice of the grape. And you, Eveline and Cecilia, continued Mrs. Montague, addressing the housemaids, must superintend the arrangements of the dormitories, and let the air out of the beds and reinflate them. Examine the elastic spring mattresses, mend the gossamer curtains, sweep the velvet carpets, and take care of the tubes for withdrawing the decomposed air and admitting fresh or in proper order. Also clean the baths attached to each chamber, and take care of these abundant supply of water. I'm told that an ablution of the common aqueous fluid is becoming more fashionable than any medicated baths, says Evelina, and that some people of rank actually use a composition of alkaline oil to remove the pulverous particles which may have lodged upon their epidermis in the course of the day. I feel the commands have been issued, madam, rejoined Cecilia, that you are oblivious to the alteration that has affected the superior dormitory. The air there is no longer changed by means of tubes, but there is a fan-feather ventilator fixed to the ceiling, which, by its gentle undulations, occasion the free circulation of the aeriform fluid. I do not think, however, that it is quite adequate to supply the place of the tubes, as, upon entering the room the other morning, I received a strong sensation of ozone. I am confident that the proportions of nitrogen more than tripled that of the oxygen in the air contained in the whole apartment. I am sorry for that, said as it is too late to change it. We must do the best we can. So go, all of you, and attend to my directions, for as I should be very sorry to have my dear brother-in-law, Sir Ambrose, and my nephew, Lord Edmund, put to any inconvenience during your sojourn to my dwelling, to say nothing of the great and noble guests who may, perchance, also honour the mansion with their presence. Whilst this bustle was taking place in the house of Mr. Montague, Edric and his tutor were on their way to London. It was with infinite difficulty, however, the doctor could be persuaded to set off without alarming the family, for again and again he would return to survey the treasures he was leaving behind, and the moment Edric thought he had him safe, he would recollect some indispensable requisites for the journey, and hurry back to find it. At last they were fairly started, and a favorable wind blew them rapidly towards London. Edric had never seen the vast metropolis, and his astonishment and delight when its magnificent places, its suburb streets and its public buildings, its theatres and its churches broke upon him was quite beyond description. His transports and exclamations, indeed, at length became so violent as to annoy the learned doctor.
"If you feel such rapture at the sight of London," he said peevishly, "I suppose you will be reluctant to quit it. I dare say you are already spent having proposed to travel."
"Oh, what is that?" cried Eric, without attending to him. Lost in amazement, he saw a house in the suburbs gently slide out of its place and glide majestically along the road, a lady at one of the windows kissing her hand some way to another house as she passed. "Do my eyes deceive me, or does that house move?"
"Certainly it does," replied the doctor. "Did you never see a moving house before? You must have heard of them at any rate, for nothing can be so common. It certainly is convenient, when one wants to go into the country for a few weeks, to be able to take one's house with one. It saves a great deal of trouble in packing, and permits one to have all one's little conveniences about one. You see, there are grooves in the bottom of the houses that just fit on the iron railways, and as they are propelled by steam, they slide on without much trouble. It does not answer, however, with any other small houses, for large ones can't well be made compact enough. However, you must postpone your admiration of that, as well as of those other wonders of London, for here we are at Lord Gustavus's door. What a noble mansion, is it not? The street, Edric, is called the Strand. It is most fashionable in London. Besides, it adjoins the Queen's favourite place at Somerset House."
"Is that the palace?" said Eric. "It seems a noble pile of building."
"The gardens are fine," replied the doctor, "but they are thrown open to the public, and nothing is paid for admission. It is reckoned vulgar to walk in them. You English do not like anything that you do not pay for, and more of this hereafter. We must now prepare to pay our respects to our noble host."
Lord Gustavus de Montfort received them very kindly, but Edric found something in his voice and manners excessively forbidding. He had a pompous, disagreeable manner of speaking, with a nasal accent so strong that it was absolutely torture to Eric, whose sense of hearing was uncommonly fine to listen to. He had also a conceited, dictatorial way of delivering his opinion, which Edric thought extremely unpleasant. He generally commenced his speeches with,
"Thinking as I think, and as I am positive everyone who hears must think, or at least ought to think,"
and his extraordinary formed epitome of his character, as he was firmly persuaded that everyone who differed in the slightest degree with his opinion was decidedly wrong, whilst the possibility of his ever being mistaken himself never entered his imagination. His father had been one of the counselors of the late Queen, and his eldest brother having declined to take the father's place upon his death, Lord Gustavus had been appointed to it. Thus he was really a person of some consequence in the state, and though his being was quite a matter of chance, arising from the circumstance above mentioned and the indolence of the Queen, he affected to regard as a matter of personal favour to himself, and endeavoured to persuade his hearers that the affairs of government could not possibly go on without him. Knowing his foible of wishing to be thought of importance in his realm, and feeling the want of a leader of rank, some of the discontented spirits of the kingdom had endeavoured to gain him over to their party, and though Lord Gustavus was strictly loyal, and even particularly fond of taking to his gracious Majesty the Queen, and boasting his confidence she placed in him, yet his vanity could not altogether resist the able attacks made upon it by the rebels. He wavered, he began to talk of reform, and to mingle boasts of his popularity amongst the people, and those he had been before indulged in, of enjoying the favour of his sovereign. Thus he hung upon the balance, ready to incline to either side, and according to the circumstances that time or chance might produce.
"I am extremely happy," he said, as he advanced to meet his guests, "that my worthy and respected friend Father Morris has procured me the honour of such an illustrious visitors. The Holy Father has informed me of the sublime purpose that animates your bosoms and leads you to traverse realms of air to explore the hitherto undiscovered secrets of the grave. His particularity of me has also led him to imagine that my humble means might perchance prove conductive to so great an end, and he has requested me to give you all the assistance in my power to promote the gigantic objects you have in view. Thus you may rest assured, no efforts may be wanting in my part to fulfill his wishes, and as Though insignificant to myself, I am happy to be honored to the protection and favor of Her Majesty the Queen, my most gracious sovereign, and also as my feeble attempts to promote the public good have been rewarded by the gratitude of the people. It may perchance be in my power to serve you, and in the meantime I hope you will do me the honor to partake in such hospitality as my humble mansion can afford.
So saying, Lord Gustavus led the way through the sumptuous suite of rooms, to one where an elegant cold collation was laid out, of which he invited his guests to partake. Nothing could be more splendid than the furniture and embellishments of this apartment. The rooms were hung with crimson silk and trimmed with gold. Valuable paintings decorated the walls. Statues of inestimable price filled every corner. Magnificent mirrors increased tenfold the magic of the scene. Lord Gustavus secretly enjoyed the astonishment and admiration painted upon the countenance of his guests, and whilst he openly affected to talk to of his poorhouse and of his humble attempts to entertain them, etc., his heart covered exultantly the grandeur around him, and his eyes sparkled with pleasure at the effect he saw it produced upon the strangers. Nothing makes one so much disposed to be in a good humor with the world as being in the good humor with oneself, and nothing is so certain to produce that delightful sensation as to see what we possess excite the admiration of others. Thus, as the flattery conveyed by looks far outweighs that expressed by words, and as the looks of Edric and the Doctor unequivocally declared their sentiments, Lord Gustavus was quite enchanted with his visitors, and spared no pains to render them equally happy as himself. He ordered a large apartment to be prepared for the Doctor, that he might make his arrangements for the intended Egyptian expedition quite at his ease. He commanded his servants to obey the directions implicitly, and he directed tradesmen to supply everything that might be wanted at his own expense. Having thus given the Doctor carte blanche, he next turned his attention to Edric, and finding it was his first visit to London, volunteered to show him all the wonders of that immense metropolis, which then, spreading enormously in every direction, seemed like the fabled monster of the Indians, to stretch its enormous arms on every side and swallow up the hapless villages which were so unfortunate to fall within its reach. In the meantime, Sir Ambrose had begun to repent, though secretly, of the unwarrantable severity with which he had treated his son. It is trite, though undeniable observation, that we never know the real value of any possession until we have lost it. And thus Sir Ambrose, though he had thought nothing of the respectful and dutiful attentions of his son, whilst he was in the habit of constantly receiving them, now felt their want, and regretted bitterly the ill-timed harshness that deprived him of them forever. Still, however, he was too obstinate to own that he had been wrong, and though he knew that by recalling his son he should restore his lost happiness, he, like many other persons in similar situations, most magnanimously determined to persist in being miserable. The Duke of Cornwall was quite astonished, and even indignant in what he termed the inconsistency of his friend. "How can you be so weak as to still regret the loss of that peevish boy?" he said, as on the second morning of Edric's departure he entered the library of Sir Ambrose, attended by his confessor, Father Murphy. "Depend upon it, it is bad policy, for patience robs care of the bitterest sting, and as Holy Father says. You often preach that doctrine to me, don't you, Father Murphy?" Father Murphy was an Irishman, and gifted with a rich brogue, which, aided by his comely figure, round rosy face, and little laughing black eyes, gave a particular raciness to everything he said. He had not long filled the office he held then, and though he had been recommended to it, on the death of the Duke's late confessor by Father Morris, yet no two human beings could be more different than he and the referred personage. Father Murphy, indeed, was a general favorite, and the whole household of the Duke concurred in thinking him quite unparalleled as for a priest. For, as he was not very fond of doing penance himself, he was not very rigid in imposing it upon others, and consequently he and the penitents were always upon the best terms imaginable. In short, he seemed especially designed by nature to be good friends with all the world, On his side, he certainly did the utmost not to thwart the benefits old lady's kind intentions. Now I smiled at good-humored at the Duke's question. But, "Oh," he said, "and it is me you're quoting from, your grace. And where's the use of that, pray? When you know I'm just here and ready to quote for myself." "If all your observations are as good as the Duke has just repeated," said Sir Ambrose, "I don't know anybody that might be quoted from with more advantage." "Oh, sure, it is of myself you're saying that," asked Father Murphy. "For if ye are, ye never made a better spatch in all your life. There's only a little mistake if you're thinking the observation you're talking of came out of my own head, for it didn't do any such thing." "Do not be alarmed," said Father Morris, who now approached and who spoke with his usual satirical sneer. "No one who knows you will ever suspect you of any kind thing so atrocious." "Good-natured and integrity are sometimes more than equivalent to brilliant talents," said Sir Ambrose bitterly. "True," rejoined Father Morris, in one of his softest, most insinuating tones. "But they become inestimable when united, as in the example before us," bowing to Father Murphy as he spoke. Sir Ambrose turned and looked earnestly at the tall, thin figure of the monk as he stood before him, his arms crossed upon his breast, and his head, as usual, bent towards the ground, but he did not speak. A short pause ensued, which was broken by the Duke suddenly exclaiming, "Did you not say Dr. Entwerfen had gone with Edric?" "Certainly he has." "Then depend upon it, the whole thing was planned. They've yet taken some wild scheme into their heads, and they've gone to execute it."
"Impossible."
"I assume no impossibility in the business," resumed the Duke. "I think the case is clear. They did not know how to get off decently, and Edric pretended to quarrel with you and me to give the thing a face."
"I cannot fancy Edric guilty of such meanness," cried Sir Ambrose passionately.
"I don't think the matter admits a single doubt. What do you think of the matters, Father Morris?" "Men devoted to austere professions like myself," replied the priest without raising his eyes from the ground, "know but little of what is passing in the world. Thus, through the body being no longer shrouded in the gloom of a cloister, my mind remains still too much abstracted in the busy scenes around me for me to be a competent judge of the effect of human passions." "Ach, then you're very right about nothing saying. Ach, then you are very right to say nothing about them," cried Father Murphy. "For though I'm in a passion every day of my life, I never know what to say when I begin to talk of it, and so I just think of the wisest way to hold my tongue." Neither Sir Ambrose nor the Duke made any reply, and after settling that they should commence their journey on the following morning, they separated.